It had been weeks since Jidenna left the psychiatric hospital and spoken to the old owner of the banjo. He had been having second thoughts about going to the village where the old banjo owner had asked him to go to have it destroyed. Jidenna sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the banjo that had appeared once again, as it had been doing this past few weeks. The wood was worn, the strings stretched tight with a threatening hum, as if it was alive, ready to play its own dark tune. His hands trembled at his sides, the same hands that had tried so many times to destroy it, the same hands that had failed him. Maybe if I burn it one more time, he thought, it'll be gone for good. But deep inside, Jidenna knew it wouldn't work. Nothing ever did. He had tried everything to rid himself of the cursed instrument. He'd burned it in the backyard, but by morning, it was back on his bed, unscathed. He'd left it on the street, but it was there when he returned home. He'd thrown it from his second-floor window, only to find it perched delicately on his pillow, as if it had never been thrown at all. A knock on his door pulled him out of his spiraling thoughts. His driver, Daniel, stood in the doorway, his face a mixture of excitement and concern. "Sir," Daniel said, stepping inside, "are you ready?" "The car's packed. We leave at dawn." Jidenna forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. He glanced at the banjo, then back at Daniel. "I don't know, Daniel. I don't know if I'm ready." "Everything will be fine," assured Daniel. "You have explained everything to me. This has to be done. Sir, we leave at dawn." And without another word, he left Jidenna and shut the door. The next morning, the car was packed and ready. Jidenna's heart hammered in his chest as he donned the banjo, strapping it around his back like a burden he could never escape. Daniel and some men had loaded the back of the car with all the supplies they would need: hoes, cutlasses, pickaxes, chainsaws, ropes. And there was the beggar, the strange man who had led them this far, the one who'd promised to show them the path to the tree. He was now cleaner, but he smelled strongly of gutter water. All the men avoided him as they entered the car, but it made no difference. They could smell him in the car. As they drove through the winding roads, Jidenna couldn't shake the feeling that the banjo was watching him, waiting. He tried to remain calm, but as they neared the village, something shifted in the air. It was subtle at first, a chill, an unnatural feeling of dread. And then, without warning, the banjo began to play, a violent, discordant chord that rattled Jidenna's bones. "Damn it!" Daniel slammed on the brakes, his eyes wide with alarm. "What the hell is that?" The car swerved, and before anyone could react, it tipped over. The sound of metal twisting, glass shattering, and the tires screeching filled the air. The world spun as the car crashed to the ground, tossing everyone inside like rag dolls. Jidenna was the first to pull himself free from the wreckage, his body sore, but miraculously unharmed. The beggar was already on his feet, his face twisted into a strange grin, though there was no joy in it, only a knowing, terrible look. "She's resisting," the beggar murmured, his voice almost playful. "She knows her time is near." Before Jidenna could ask what he meant, the beggar turned and started walking away, heading into the thickening woods. Daniel scrambled to his feet, and the others followed. One of their men, however, lay motionless on the ground. He was dead. "We walk from here," the beggar called back, and with that, they began the trek into the wilderness. As they walked deeper into the forest, the trees grew denser, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The moon above was bright, its pale light casting long shadows over the path. The banjo, strapped to Jidenna's back, began to hum again, louder now, louder than ever before. The air grew thick with tension, and the path grew more treacherous as the vines began to curl around their legs, slowing their progress. The beggar muttered something under his breath, but Jidenna couldn't hear him over the furious melody of the banjo. And then, as they reached a clearing, the music reached a fever pitch. The banjo's strings rattled, vibrating violently. The earth beneath them seemed to shudder, as though something vast and ancient was awakening. Jidenna's hands, already raw from his previous attempts to destroy the instrument, began to ache as if the banjo was drawing him in. The air was thick with magic now, palpable and oppressive. Something terrible was about to happen. Jidenna barely had time to register the sound before something reached out from the shadows, a massive, writhing vine, its tendrils quick as lightning. With a sickening crack, the vine wrapped itself around one of the men, pulling him into the air with terrifying strength. The man screamed as his body twisted and jerked, his cries drowned out by the ferocious music of the banjo. "Run!" the beggar shouted, his voice hoarse with panic. His face, normally sunken and emotionless, was now twisted with fear. "Don't look back! Don't stop running!" Without thinking, Jidenna and the remaining men sprinted down the path, the sound of their heavy footsteps blending with the frenzied music of the banjo. But as they ran, more vines surged from the underbrush, faster than they could dodge. Another man was snatched from behind, the vine lifting him off the ground before pulling him into the choking darkness. His scream was abruptly cut short. The remaining group, Jidenna, the beggar, and the two other men, ran for their lives, now only 4 in number. The surrounding woods seemed alive, twisting and writhing with malevolent intent. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie light across the path, but it did little to calm their rising fear. "We have to keep me alive," the beggar rasped, grabbing Jidenna by the arm as they stumbled through the thickening undergrowth. His grip was firm, insistent. "I must be kept alive, Jidenna. I am the key. Only I can complete the ritual. Without me, everything is lost." The banjo kept playing, its song maddening, hypnotic, its music wrapping around them like a cocoon. The tension in the air thickened, vibrating with a terrible energy. Suddenly, from the shadows ahead, skeletal figures emerged. They were tall and unnaturally thin, their bones wrapped in vines and rotting leaves. Their eyes were hollow, their skin stretched tight across their bones, decayed beyond recognition. Each carried an eerie, ancient weapon, a scythe, a sickle, a rusted spear. The men froze. The skeleton's hollow eyes seemed to pierce through them, and then they moved, slowly, deliberate, like they had all the time in the world. One of the remaining men, his face pale with terror, took a step back. "No, no!" he screamed, trying to run. But the skeletons were quicker. They lunged forward, their skeletal fingers grabbing him by the shoulders, pulling him into the air. He struggled, kicking, screaming, but his voice was lost as the vines twisted around him, pulling him to the ground, his body going limp. Another scream echoed through the trees. "Don't stop!" the beggar shouted. "Run, Jidenna, run!" But Jidenna didn't move. His legs refused to obey. If you have come this far, it means you are enjoying the story. Please click the subscribe button to subscribe to my channel, then hit the like button for more stories. New stories every week. His heart pounding in his chest. The music from the banjo, it was too loud, too much. It was drowning him. The sound was hypnotizing, pulling at the very fabric of his mind, making him feel as if he were losing control of himself. Then something snapped inside him. Jidenna could no longer stand it. He grabbed the banjo from his back, feeling the heat of the strings sear into his skin, and struck a chord. He screamed with pain as the strings burned his fingers, but he kept playing. For the first time since he had touched it, the banjo responded. It fought back, resisting his touch, but Jidenna held on. The skeletons stopped, their motion frozen in place as though they were waiting for some signal, some command. Their hollow eyes seemed to lock onto Jidenna, their skulls cocked in curiosity. Jidenna struck another note, louder this time. The air vibrated with energy. The skeletons backed away, retreating into the shadows, waiting for the next move. He could feel it. The banjo was alive. It was playing with him, against him. The music it played was maddening and unpredictable. But there was something else in Jidenna. Something ancient, something more powerful than anything. His will. The ground trembled as he played, as the banjo and Jidenna fought for control. The strings burned hotter now, like molten metal, digging into his hands. His skin began to peel away, the blood dripping freely from his fingertips, but still, he played. "I cannot stop now," Jidenna thought, his head spinning. He could feel the banjo pulling him in deeper, could feel the very earth shifting beneath his feet. And then, something shifted in the woods ahead. A new pathway had appeared. It was small at first, almost imperceptible, But as Jidenna kept playing, the path opened wider. His eyes followed it, and there, just ahead, stood the tree. It was enormous, towering over them like a nightmare made real. Its gnarled trunk seemed to breathe, inhaling and exhaling with a low, rasping sound, and its roots curled upward like fingers stretching toward the sky. The tree was unlike any he had ever seen, standing alone in the middle of the clearing, its leaves only at the very top, over 30 feet in the air, casting shadows that seemed to creep along the ground like living things. The music from the banjo grew louder and sharper. It was as if the tree itself was answering, resonating with the notes. "This is it," Jidenna thought. "This is the tree." The air grew even thicker, suffocating as they approached. The moonlight above was blinding now, the pale light making the tree look even more monstrous, more alive. The vines around the tree began to stir, slithering toward them with unnatural speed, their thickness like serpents' coils. Jidenna's heart skipped a beat as the first vine shot toward him. He didn't see it coming. The vine lashed out, heading straight for him, wrapping around his legs. It was fast, but he was faster. He had to be. Without thinking, Jidenna struck the banjo again, his hands shaking, the pain overwhelming. He screamed as his blood poured onto the strings. But as the note reverberated through the clearing, the vine paused. It was as if the vine had been struck by some invisible force. It withdrew, slithering back into the shadows. "Keep playing, Jidenna," the beggar urged, his voice frantic. "It's our only chance." Jidenna did not stop. His hands were raw, his body exhausted, but the banjo demanded it. The tree above them seemed to tremble, its massive branches swaying violently. The moonlight flickered, and Jidenna's vision blurred. His hands, slick with sweat and blood, struck the strings again, each note a desperate plea to keep the vines at bay. The banjo responded and the vines recoiled. The beggar seized the moment. "Cut the tree down now," he shouted to the remaining men. "Everything you've got! Use the pickaxe, the axe, the chainsaw. We don't have much time." The men, still in shock from the horrors they had witnessed, nodded shakily and rushed toward the tree. The one with the pickaxe struck first, slamming it into the base of the trunk with a mighty crack. The one with the axe followed, hacking furiously at the gnarled wood. The man with the chainsaw roared to life the engine, his hands trembling as he pressed the blade against the bark. The tree shuddered in response, but it did not fall. Not yet. Jidenna gritted his teeth, the banjo's music reverberating through his skull, threatening to consume him. He fought back the rising panic and kept playing, each note ringing out as the battle for control between him and the banjo raged on. The men kept hacking, each blow landing harder than the last. And then, with a final scream from the chainsaw, the tree began to crack, its mighty trunk splitting open. The vines, the skeletons, the music, they all seemed to scream in protest, but it was too late. The tree had fallen. An unsettling silence hung in the air. The beggar stood frozen, his weathered hands clutching his tattered shawl. Jidenna glanced at him uneasy. The moment stretched, oppressive, until faint voices began to rise from the surrounding forest. It was as if dozens of women were arguing, their words overlapping in a cacophony of anguish and fury. The voices grew louder, and the beggar dropped to his knees, trembling as he muttered incantations under his breath. The air grew colder, and from the stump of the felled tree, a figure began to emerge. It was a familiar-looking woman to Jidenna, her form ethereal yet commanding, her swollen belly unmistakable. She was pregnant, and her gaze was fixed on the beggar with an intensity that made Jidenna take an instinctive step back. "Your incantations are worthless here," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. It was a voice heavy with sorrow and rage. "How does it feel knowing you have the blood of so many women on your hands?" The beggar's lips moved soundlessly, his eyes wide with terror. Jidenna, bewildered, turned to the spirit. The woman's gaze softened briefly as she looked at Jidenna. "I am free now, but not entirely. The banjo you carry has lost its power. It served its purpose, but I cannot move on until he confesses." She pointed a spectral finger at the beggar. Jidenna's brow furrowed. "Confesses? To what? What is she talking about?" he demanded, looking down at the beggar, who shook his head vehemently. "I know nothing of this." the beggar croaked, his voice hoarse. The spirit's expression darkened, and she took a step closer, her translucent feet hovering just above the ground. Enough lies. Shall I recount your deeds? Her tone was sharp, and the beggar flinched as though struck. 1972, she began, her words like a gavel falling in a courtroom. A business tycoon wins the government contract of a lifetime, but his wife dies mysteriously soon after. 1976, a politician secures the governorship of Ebonyi State, and his wife is kidnapped and killed. 1989, a son becomes wealthy beyond imagination after his mother's sudden and tragic death. Shall I go on? 2011, a musician rises to fame following the inexplicable death of his fiancée. You were there each time, weren't you? The beggar's breathing quickened, but he remained silent. This time is different, the spirit continued, her voice trembling with emotion. This time I was pregnant when you and Ebenezer decided to end my life. You took not only my life, but that of my unborn child. Her voice broke, and she paused to collect herself. You used my essence to bless that banjo. Every string, every note bore the weight of my suffering. But my baby, she gave me strength. Her energy sustained me until I could manipulate the banjo myself. Jidenna was still confused. I am the woman in your dreams, she cried as if she had read Jidenna's mind. The woman in the picture in Ebenezer's room at the hospital. She frowned her face. Ebenezer, the string king. Jidenna's mouth was dry. He tried to piece together the fragments of her story, but it felt like grasping at smoke. Ebenezer? He asked hesitantly. What does he have to do with this? The spirit's expression hardened again. Ebenezer was my lover, and then my husband. He was a musician, struggling to find his place. I believed in him, supported him, and made contacts to help him succeed. But he grew impatient. He sought shortcuts, turned to diabolical means. Her gaze shifted back to the beggar. You were his answer. The spiritualist who promised success in exchange for blood. She spat the words like venom. The beggar began to sob. Thank you so much for sticking to the story till the end. Please subscribe, hit the like button and the notification bell so that you get notified when we upload new videos. A new video will be uploaded every week.